Okay. So yeah, we're just already getting into it. But have
Mhm.
you? I don't know enough of your story because I mainly saw you on Baxter's podcast, and I was just loved your vibe. I was like, you seem very zen, chill. There's just certain people I feel like I have a sense of. I describe this to people, and this is probably a okay space to say it, but it's almost like I can see people's auras sometimes,
Mm.
and you just have a good feel or aura about you, for lack of a better word. And I was like, man, we should talk. And I've seen Aaron a few times
Yeah,
around and like him. And I'm like, you guys
yeah.
just must have a cool family. And so, have you, I know your dad obviously is Christian, and I know Aaron's had I don't moving around relationship with his faith, right? But have
Yeah.
you always identified as Christian? Have you always been
No,
Christian?
no, no.
No. Okay.
I've been like very far from faith until 4 years ago or 3 years ago, let's say.
Okay.
We went to church as children, like until our 18th birthday. That was mandatory, like Protestant
Okay.
church. But it didn't make sense to me. A lot of it, I didn't connect to it at all, and so it wasn't really a part of my life outside of having to listen to my father read the Bible and everything. And then as soon as I didn't have to anymore, I ran away from it. Um, but all that changed with experience and with what you can describe as this little corner, I guess. And I have my dad to thank for it because he always was very critical of my. Um, well, he was not critical. He was intellectually honest enough to tell me when my arguments didn't make sense.
Mm,
Like he wouldn't let me say things that just didn't make sense about Jesus or whatever, because he's done work on the historical Jesus. And
mm,
um, I think you have said, like, I saw your name with the quote, "Tell me what God you don't believe in, and I probably
yeah.
don't either." Something like that. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's not original to me. I think
No.
that's something I've heard it in multiple other places. The place where I can trace it back to is Rob Bell.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But
I've heard it before as well, but I like it a lot. Uh,
yeah.
and
Well, and it's true.
yeah, that's true for sure. So he helped me with that, and then my brother helped me get into initially Jordan Peterson and Vervaeke and these guys, and they helped me intellectually understand the utility and the value of faith. And it was through some personal, more spiritual experiences that my worldview just pretty much collapsed bit by bit. And now I call myself a Christian because I don't think it's something I can really fully decide, even though uh, I do believe, you know.
Yeah.
But it's also integral, I think.
Yeah, well that's a little bit, I mean that's something that I think a lot of us can thank Jordan Peterson for, at least reawakening to people that what does it mean to say that you believe in God? And it's a frightful thing. And if it's a I've said to atheists before, and I think it's true, because I love people like Peter Rollins, and there's even, uh, sorry, I jump all over the place. Hopefully, you could track. You may be
I like
familiar
it.
enough with
I like
the
a bit of
weird way.
chaos in my life. It's good for me.
Okay,
Go ahead.
but uh, Peter Rollins will talk this way a lot, or even I was talking to my priest about it one day, and he sent me these. It's from a British, I believe, Orthodox journal from like the 70s. There's these two articles that I forget the name of them. I was wanting to reread them again because I read them for a while, but I think I gave them back to him because he didn't want to give them to me. Uh, it's hard to find those in print anymore. These things from the 70s from Britain. Uh, but it was like one of the title of one of them was Purification by Atheism, and um, and another one of them was I can't remember the title of it, but it's essentially it's the idea. This is something Peter Rollins talks about a lot. Is that a lot of what atheism is, and I believe this very much, is a rejection of a false representation and image of God, and it's a reaction to that,
Hmm.
which I'm fully on board with. All that's called is just like getting rid of idolatry.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic, and I think atheists can really help with that. Um, and the other the other piece of that is that you if you're going to play the game of subjective objective and what can we objectively know in a propositional tyranny left-brained way with absolute certainty game, we're all agnostics.
Mhm.
Like, I mean,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you want to play that game, all of us are agnostics.
Mhm.
So it's kind of the debate is almost irrelevant to me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and it's made with certain presuppositions that kind of defeat the whole debate itself. Like, I cannot
Hmm.
prove or disprove God is within that framework, so why do you debate about it? It's a bit at this point it's difficult to listen to. Like, I used to get really excited about it. Like, you get your Peterson team versus Sam Harris and
Yeah.
his war, but yeah, it doesn't stimulate me as much anymore. I like to see how people act around me, and whatever propositions they hold on to is much less important than it used to be to
Yeah.
me. I used to
Or it's
select
even,
people on based on that, like, what do you believe?
yeah. Yeah, as a single like univocal identity marker. Like it's just who cares?
Yeah,
But it's well, it's not that who cares. I do think it's still an important thing. I don't disregard it completely, but it's not where I put my focus. And then connected to what you were saying too, I think TLC, participating in TLC, being initiated in TLC kind of disabuses you of that
mm,
somewhat because you get really used to people who and Chad is great at this. I think a lot of us have figured this out over time is that I want to talk to people who want to play. And if you have this kind of really I would argue that it's kind of a fear-based that single vector fear-based thing of like which camp are you in? I don't know that you can ever play. You're too
no,
it's like a it's too much gravity, not enough levity.
yeah,
And I don't know that any of it's really honest to probably where you are. A lot of it's coming from ego
yeah,
and defensiveness and your own insecurity. It's another thing
mhm,
Rollins will talk a lot about. He's like, it's like the guy at the bar, or at the party who's drinking all the time, but he just keeps talking about how he's not an alcoholic. Like
yeah.
he just keeps bringing it up, and everybody else is like, nobody else said you were, dude.
Yeah,
Like telling you a
absolutely.
lot more about him.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, true. I'm thinking about playing what you're saying. It's true that, like, it's hard to play when you're fearful or when you apply force. Because I've tried both in sports in my life, and both didn't work,
Yeah.
like fear of failure or just trying to force something to happen in the game. So
Yeah.
it's true. It checks out. Actually, I don't really know you as well because I've not been involved with this little corner, like the live streams and stuff. That's really new to me. I'm really trying to
Mm.
understand the ethic of it. It's pretty interesting. For people that don't know, Luke was just in a live stream for the last like hour and a half, and I was listening to it. And you just see people coming in. Sometimes they don't say anything, and you just see their names on the screens, and sometimes they pop back out. Um,
Yeah.
that's a really interesting phenomenon. I also participated once on Christian's channel.
Hmm.
Um, what is all of that about? What are you guys trying to do with that? Is it a community thing? Are you trying to figure out the truth about some things? What is for you guys the purpose of it, or for you personally, maybe?
Okay. Yeah. So the way that I see it is the broad, I'll start by just giving a broad chronological evolution of the little corner because it's like the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. Paul Vanderklay puts out his video, the algorithm connects all these different people. Randos start reaching out to him for conversations. He becomes a bottleneck. So then we start connecting with each other
Yeah,
through Paul, and then we start having our own conversations. Um, we start having these conversations. We start this channel called Randos United, which now there's two of them, which is confusing. But where we would just post our own conversations because Paul started recording his randos conversations and posting them, and this community started to evolve. And then there was the Bridges of Meaning Discord that some of the local guys from Sacramento started who knew Paul. That happened for a while. Then Jacob, somebody was laying, Tayo was laying this out really well the other day in some live stream, and he knew the sequence even better than I do. And then he was saying something happened. Oh, other Discord communities started to get involved. So like Jacob Federici, one of our the Jews in the corner, came in from I think Eric Weinstein's channel. There's all these other players in the mosaic of the TLC that came in at all these different points. And then he started doing these just chatting streams on YouTube where he would just open it up, talk about whatever. And that's probably even the origin of what I do now on Grail Country. I was involved in Discord at different point because I was kind of during COVID to different degrees. There would be on Discord, there were Discord's a weird medium if you're not used to it, but a lot of older people tend to just be like Discord's too chaotic.
Yeah.
But there were all these you could do voice chats or you could do video chats all the time, and it's all just none of it's recorded. And so it's all
Yeah.
really ephemeral, which has its own really cool vibe about it.
Yeah.
Um, and so we were involved in a lot of those. I started a lot of different messaging apps that where I'd communicate with people either through Voxer or like Signal is one that I use now where we have different group chats. And and I say all that to say the spirit of what I would call TLC. There's kind of a body of TLC. There's different character. There's different multiplicity that you can point to that make up this larger whatever spiritual body that is the TLC. And but the spirit of that has moved, it's kind of like the spirit moves where it will. And I think TLC is this existing thing, but then in all those different mediums there's different times where one will really heat up and pop off. So like Discord for a while was like the place where everything was happening, especially the video and the audio chats. Like that was really, I would say, where the meatiest part of it was happening, and most of the central figures were happening. And then people would come out of the lurk with that. Some people just like to stay in text. Um, and then Jacob, it all kind of started with YouTube with PVK, and then Jacob started those just chatting streams, and then StreamYard started happening, and that was this whole new thing. And for a long time, I'd stopped using Discord. I had moved probably a lot of my interaction to kind of these private group chats
Mhm.
through messaging apps and things. Where because a lot of it is I think out loud. I'm an external processor, and so I would just send people, I'd be watching a video, take screenshots of comments, and then I would just send people, I don't know, like a 15-minute audio of just random thoughts that I had. And then people would interact on that and we'd engage, and there'd be a lot of interesting conversations. And we did that for years. So that's where a lot of my best friends in the corner happened, kind of evolved around those things. And then I just started, I don't know when, a few months ago, decided to start doing these streams where essentially I do the same thing that I did in these messaging apps. Like I would just open it up, there'd be something on my mind, uh, I often talk about mosaic vision. So there'd be some mosaic of all these different things that are happening in the corner universe.
Mhm.
And but somehow there's some weird, this is how my mind works, some weird mosaic unity to it all. And then I would just talk about that kind of free form monologuing, and then kind of just open it up to people. And so you ask, and it kind of seems like that's what's hot right now. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like this morning, I don't know, that's the most active people I've seen on a stream. Like we had like 86 people at some point that were
Mhm.
watching live.
Mhm.
Um, and what's so cool about one of the, to answer your question, the spirit moves all over, and I think you don't know where it's coming or going from, but you see its fruit.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be attuned to those things, and that's just kind of how it works. And the the live streams are fun for me because one of my biggest joys of the corner is, and I've been banging this drum forever, is the personal element of it, meeting people. I love the people. The ideas are fine, and obviously we talk about a lot of ideas, but it's
Yeah.
always been about the randos.
Yeah.
And that happens, I don't know, in the streams it's fun. Like all these people, like there was, I don't know, a couple new people I've never engaged with this morning. I've met so many people through that. Neil, Christian, uh, Sourdough Neil, all these different people that I've gotten to be close with. McMo, like they all came into the corner
Yeah.
and like at least became prominent figures in the corner coming out of the lurk on live streams.
Yeah.
you know. And what's going on with that? I don't know, but it's cool. I
Yeah,
like it.
it's super interesting. Like the first time I just went into one, I was just mostly marveling at what was happening and how everyone kind of implicitly knew what you were supposed to do. Um, and yeah,
Unspoken norms.
yeah, exactly. And you
Yeah.
hosted very well, I noticed. Like people, I think people like that when someone just picks the ball up when there's no one else. And so it seems to gel pretty well. I like it.
It's a good really early on. So a key thing, and this is to your point of hospitality, because that's something we talk a lot about in TLC is hospitality. And Tyler Anderson, so one of the uh, people know Joey for the Discord, one of Paul's local people, or maybe they don't. But this guy Joey, who was local to Sacramento, at least at the time, and in Paul's local Jordan Peterson meetup, him and this other guy Tyler Anderson started the Discord, and Joey's great. He's not as active anymore, and Tyler's not either because I think he ended up getting married and just doing other things where he's not doing this anymore. But he said once that the church has become a masculine space with female language when it should be a feminine space with male language, with masculine language. And that was just like one of those things where it's just such a succinct way to say so much. That's very true. I think it's an accurate analysis and it's very
Yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah,
And I try to model that. Like that's what I'm trying to do in my live streams, really. I want it to be a feminine space where it's like anybody's welcome.
yeah,
Uh, you can come in, it's cool. You don't need any sort of there's no requirements really. I mean, there are, you want people to have cameras on and things like that because otherwise one of the benefits of the live streams and the video and the audio chat is um I think I don't know. I love McLuhan, and McLuhan is Marshall McLuhan, and he talks about the medium as a message, which I talk about a lot. But these different technological mediums have different spirits to them. Like text space is a certain thing. Audio is a different character. Video is even a different character. And I've often said that I think video and podcasts, one of the reasons this whole thing is happening is because these mediums tran translate more of the fullness of the entirety of the person, and it's helped us to learn how to converse better because we just live in this text-based thing for so long, which is a lot. It's a lot more difficult to do well, I think, text-based
yeah,
communication.
yeah,
So I just try to do that. I try to. I'm talking a lot now, but I try to not talk a lot. Well, I mean, I talk a bunch at the front because it's just me.
yeah.
But then when I open it up, I try to shut up and let other people talk. And because it's person making,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah,
it's, and we're trying to take part in that, it's relational and trying to bring people out, hear what they have to say, that's the masculine piece, invite criticism. I
mm.
love to highlight criticism and people that are pushing back. Like I almost never highlight comments, people that say positive things. Like I
Like
mainly just
criticism.
highlight the
Yeah,
people that are like pushing back.
yeah. That's how you
So
get somewhere, right?
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
That's where you're gonna learn the most.
no, that's for sure. What is your personality like? Did you ever do the Peterson test?
The Big Five.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm really
So
curious.
yeah, I have it saved on my phone. So I have a weird personality. Um, or it's unique, I guess. But it's really, I actually heard Michaela Peterson talk about hers once, and like ours are really close.
Oh yeah.
I think it's probably really similar to Jordan's too.
Mm.
Um, but it is, where is it? So yeah, it is. So I have the subcategories too. Doesn't you probably can't even show it, can I? Um, so my agreeableness is 32nd percentile, conscientiousness 35, extroversion 96,
Wow.
right? Neuroticism is 72, so pretty high for a guy,
Yeah.
and openness to experience is 98th.
Wow.
So it's
That's like
really high.
really
But
good.
then did you look into the subcategories? Because the subcategories are really fun.
Yeah, I did.
So like my agreeableness, a couple of them that my agreeableness and my neuroticism are the most interesting one because my agreeableness is 32, which is probably pretty typical male agreeableness, I would say broadly,
Mm.
but it breaks down into compassion and politeness are the two subcategories. And so my compassion is 88th percentile. It's like really high, like
Yeah.
higher than men and women. And my politeness is first percentile. So I have like first percentile politeness.
Oh
So
wow.
like in that sense, really disagreeable. I'm like out of it in a room of 100 people, I'm the most comfortable saying the uncomfortable thing. But then it's coupled with this intense, like super high compassion, empathy thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it makes me like a really weird, like a really mouthy codependent, essentially. Um, and then my neuroticism is pretty high, 72. But then my withdrawal, so it's withdrawal and volatility are the two subcategories. My withdrawal is 31, so pretty low. Like it's pretty relatively low, I would say. But my volatility is 93rd, actually, like
How
super
does
high.
that manifest in life?
I'm like an emotional roller coaster
I see.
is a lot of it.
Yeah.
For me personally. Like it's a lot of that, like I'll tell people that who know me from the corner and they can often be surprised by it, some
Mm.
of those things. Like most people wouldn't expect that I'm that volatile. And part of that is I'm 41. I've been married for, you know, coming up on 20 years. I
Wow.
have 3 kids. Um, so that stuff, if you're not to say I'm doing it perfectly or right, but I'm trying to. And if you're doing it somewhat relatively well, you should be becoming more self-controlled, I would hope.
Mm. Mm.
So a lot of that volatility is a learned skill, that people don't see that as much.
Yeah.
Uh, like I was a lot more of an asshole when I was younger.
Mm.
Like people think I am now. Like you should have seen me when I was 20. Um,
Well, that's a lot of people, I think.
yeah. So yeah, and then a lot of it is I really relate to Chad, the emotional roller coaster piece, because that the volatility combined with the compassion and like I am really pretty easily wounded because I
Mm.
feel things pretty deeply and intimately and personally.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, it can be hard. Like that's always been a struggle with the corner is because I care a lot about a lot of different things. Like well, even my church experience, like the reason I became Orthodox and left the evangelical church was really because it was at my wife's behest, I suppose, because I was too wrecked all the time. I was like emotionally um, just floundering and upset constantly, and really that was the thing that pushed us over the side. She actually just had where she was just like, we can't keep doing this. Like we got to change something, and um, and she just had the realization like a few months ago where she was it was in the context of something else, but she was like, "You probably would have never left the church, like if I wouldn't have said something."
Mm.
And I said, "No, probably not." Like I don't know. Part of that's Protestant, part of that's my low withdrawal. Like I'm a pretty loyal person. Like I'm not gonna quit, and I feel like if something's wrong, I tend to think like I might be mad at stuff in the other person, but I'm pretty self-critical, and so I'm just like, what am I doing wrong? What's like if there's some interaction that went wrong, I play it over in my mind over and over, and I think back to it of like, how could I handle it differently? What can I do to reconcile?
Yeah.
Um, it, it's a blessing and a curse, man, because some people I think never notice that stuff because they have just really high agreeableness, and it's just like water off a duck's back.
Mm.
They'll have what to me would they'll have a social interaction like that. To me, I'll just perseverate on and obsess about it for days, and to them, it's just like over.
Yeah. They let it go.
So
I see.
yeah.
What about
Which is,
the, no, go ahead.
no, no, that's it. Go ahead.
What about the openness to experience? Because I know some people that have it really high, where it manifests in them also trying a lot of things. And I know
Yeah.
others that are less, I don't know what the trait is. Less assertive, maybe, or they're less neurotic, or they're more neurotic, where they have the openness, but they don't actually do a lot of different things and try a lot of different things. How is that for you?
Uh, I would try a lot of things. Like I've been really, I've often uh, I've said that, like God was very gracious to me and saved me from a lot of more a lot of the chaos that I would have probably naturally gotten myself into just because of where and how I grew up. So I grew up in rural western South Dakota. So it's like right, I guess, like right in the middle of the U.S., northern U.S.
Okay.
Um, there's like nothing there. I describe it to people, are very, very few people. So like the Badlands, if you know what the Badlands are, that kind of, I was really close to that area. You think cattle ranches, old Western movies, like that's kind of where I grew up.
Mm.
And so there just aren't a lot of people. There's not, I mean, there's a lot of trouble you can get into, but not a lot of big city trouble. And I grew up with pretty conservative, well, I mean that in almost every way, parents, and religious parents that probably protected me from a lot of that. I mean, I definitely rebelled. Not even, was it rebellion? I don't know. What I guess I'm trying to say is, like, I'm the kind of person who would get into all kinds of things. Like I would have, if I would have had, if I would have grown up to more liberal parents and in a environment that had a lot more opportunity, like I could have got into all kinds of crazy
Yeah.
stuff. Like I lived wild enough where I grew up. And even now, like I don't run into a lot of people that are more open to experience than I am. And so I'm protected by a pretty conservative Christian moral framework. So I'm not going to like do crazy immoral things. But when I was growing up, I definitely did some of that and would do some of that. And my family, my wife especially, she's pretty grounded, and my kids keep all that pretty tethered. Um, but I mean, I don't know, I'd probably be like a traveling homeless hobo or something. Like if I didn't have a family, like I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. It makes me think that someone's personality is very important for how they could or should be raised, you know? Like
Yeah,
in your case, it was really helpful that your parents were very conservative, and maybe for someone else, it would be the opposite.
yeah. I mean, it was protecting in ways. I don't. It's one of those things that it's hard to know because I'll often you can view things positively. It's like a glass half full, glass half empty, or like the Chinese farmer. Like, is this good? I don't know. We'll
Mm.
see. It's it's uh it's hard telling because when I was growing up, though, it felt very stifling for me,
Yeah.
and I often I've had to work through resentments with my parents of because I'm weird. Like my dad, he looks kind of like Kevin Costner or something. Always had a mustache, cowboy hat, cowboy boots type thing. He's a rancher, and he always used to say to me, "Who sired you, boy?" It's like that's what he'd say, just like, "Where the hell did you come from?" Because I was kind of a weirdo for where I grew up, and you could tell from my big five, like I'm kind of a strange person and unique, whatever. And I'm very wired, like philosophically, kind of intellectually, and that's not my family. I grew up really blue collar, not academic.
Yeah.
I was the first one in my family to go to like a 4-year college. Um,
What do you major?
huh?
What did you major in?
Major
Yeah.
chemistry.
Oh, wow.
So that's probably surprising to people who wouldn't know my background because like I mean, I had a science background. Part of that was uh, like school wasn't hard for me, and
Hmm.
where I grew up, I didn't have it wasn't great education either. But if you can get good grades, in that kind of environment, people they push you toward, like, I don't know, what does somebody who's good at school do? Like, I don't know, be a doctor or a lawyer or something. Like those are the only options that seem
Yeah.
available. Um, so I was probably thinking medicine, but that to tie that in, that's kind of what I resented a little bit in my parents is they didn't, and I've learned grace from them, is like they didn't, you can only use the tools that are given you, you know? And that's very true for my parents, you know, they don't, like I can't resent my father for not cultivating and fostering a love of learning and books and encouraging me in that and helping guide me in that and push me to avenue. Because like my fantasy is that I would have, I don't know, like gone to Oxford and like been involved in like a modern day Inklings or something.
Yeah.
But like that's just so foreign to the world I grew up in and my parents. So like how could I realistically expect that? Like you can't really. So they gave you what they could. Um, and again, you know, like is it good or bad? I don't know. We'll see. I've it's been really good for me to, as I've grown and gotten out of some of my resentment, to learn compassion for my parents, you know. Because everybody's real. I do think most, well, I mean, maybe this isn't true, but people are just doing largely the best that they can. So, can't even remember your initial question. What was it?
Well, that's all right. I think it's good to do that, to assume goodness over, I don't know, being suspicious of people's motives. I've
Yeah,
really found that it just doesn't help me when I do that, being suspicious. And so you
yeah,
can get a lot more out of people when you see their beauty,
yeah.
I find.
No, absolutely. I really agree. Because you also, my last evangelical pastor, that's something he said that stuck with me. He said, I learned a long time ago to stop judging people's motives. It's just a complete waste of time
Yeah.
because you don't even know. And even if they know, like intent matters a little bit, but it's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions too. So like, it's not irrelevant, but
Mm,
really bad things can come from good intentions too. So,
that's true. What in life bothers you?
mm, systemic corruption bothers me. I mean, I talk
Mm.
about that all the time. But more personally, that's kind of abstract. More personally, I often say this in my family. It's a good question. Like pretty much my only rule is don't be ridiculous. Like I'll say that with my kids or anyone else. Like I just, what I've learned about myself is I need um, what I want, I guess, need, want, I don't know, is that with other people is because I have this 88th percentile compassion, which is kind of a gift. And I'm just like, give me anything to attach that to. Like, give me something
Hmm.
where I can have empathy for you for whatever you're doing, whatever you're doing. But like, if I don't know how to apply that, I can't. Like, I feel I can despair really quick. I can feel like a lack of agency because I don't know. Because I feel disruptions in communion really deeply. Like I'm thinking about this in my family or like with kids or something. And if there's tension or there's conflict, and I don't know how to relate to you, and I can't apply that compassion, which is kind of related to my "don't be ridiculous" thing. Like give me something. Like if
Yeah.
you just act completely um, uh, irrationally and you're like throwing a fit and you're not like give me something, meet me somewhere. Like even if it's a um, because it's almost like I don't know how to go the full distance because if everything's relational and there's some sort of conflict, like I want to meet you somewhere in the middle. And like even with a kid, like I'll maybe come 90% of the way or 95% of the way. Like I want I want 5% or something. Like if you're drowning or we're drowning, like reach up a hand or something, you know.
Hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense. So
It
that's a big
does.
one for me. Um but you don't always get it, you know. There's actually issues. There's an issue in my family right now where I have this ongoing conflict and I feel like I'm not getting a hand at all. And I haven't for years, really, in a lot of ways, or it's really rare. It's kind of like the way I'd illustrate is Jordan Peterson talks about good relationships, and you need to be in the sweet spot of 4 to 1 and 12 to 1
Yeah.
positive to negative interactions, if you remember him talking about that.
Hmm.
And it feels like it's been, and I feel like I'm in this one particular instance, it's like 20 to 1 negative to positive interactions, and that's been ongoing a very long time. And and I feel like what that's been good though for me is it's kind of that verse where it says, you know, love those uh love those who love and pray for those who persecute you, like. And because if you just love those who love you, like who cares? Everybody does that. Like that's easy.
Yeah.
That's a Jesus command. And I feel like where this has been really helpful is it's teaching me it's teaching me to truly love sometimes the unlovable. And I know it's not completely true. Like there's lovable stuff in there, but when that's really hard, that in a sense, if you're rightly oriented to it, it's a gift. Like it's teaching you long suffering and Christian virtue and loving the unlovable.
Mm.
Praying for those that persecute you. Those are the kind of things like Christians or any people will throw that out. Like it's like that's the way to live. It's real, but it's really hard to do. What does it mean to believe that? That's the
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson thing.
Yeah. It's hard and it's radical also. I don't
Yeah,
think we realize this often, how radical the Christian ideas are
yeah,
compared to what was normal or what is normal still for, like, I'm really into like Troy and Gladiator right now, these types of movies. And you
uh-huh,
see how like the ideologies and um the ideas about morality, how they influence the society like that, and wars, for example. And like it's really radical what happened, like that someone who basically preaches forgiveness and loving your enemy. Like that's so absurd actually compared to what was normal. But it's
yeah,
it's so powerful. I'm seeing more and more in practice. Did you did you ever doubt your faith? You were raised Christian, I assume.
yeah. No, no, I didn't really. And it's a weird thing because it's hard for me to know how to communicate to people because like I went through a period of, I would call it intellectual deconstruction, where I particularly it happened around the doctrine of hell, where I don't know, because I was always reading books that were outside of the camp I was in and watching YouTube videos that were outside the camp I was in, and so I always was exposed to a lot of diverse ideas. But then I remember in particular that I watched this video on it was a debate between a Christian who was an annihilationist, it's called conditional immortality or annihilationism, and he was debating the traditional view, which in the West, post Augustine, is eternal conscious torment, essentially. And I remember watching this debate because I used to be into apologetics and stuff a lot, and it was like a 2 hour debate. It was between Chris Date and this other guy who's a really well known proponent of annihilationism, and he was in the camp that I was in, so he had all the right identity markers. He was a evangelical Christian, Baptist, but he's also Calvinist, Reformed, big time sola scriptura, Bible believing person, arguing things from text. And I remember watching the debate, and he just, you know, pun intended, annihilated this guy, just like wiped the floor with him based on text.
Hmm.
And I remember having this, like, it was this, I've heard people talk about it, but it's this very liminal moment where like the rug was pulled out from you, where you're in this space of just like, what the hell just happened? It's just like everything's disoriented. All of a sudden you're in an upside down world, and you're like, this doesn't even like I don't know how to think about this. I don't know how to fit it because it's destroying your paradigms. And so that sent me deep into that world. So I studied the doctrine of hell for a long time, and I continue having lots of conversations. I mean, a lot of my live streams are about hell, and that comes up all the time. and I became a Christian annihilationist and was for a long time, and now I kind of identify as a Christian universalist because I was saying Paul on this morning's or his video, his homeroom video, he played that clip from um, Alex O'Connor and Justin Brierley and Elizabeth
Oldfield.
Oldfield, yeah, and it was good. And there's a section there where Justin Brierley says, I think he's quoting Pascal or something, and he said, um, I took a screenshot of it because I timestamped it because it was good, and he said, I should try to find what it was. Do I still have the picture? I do, I think. Let me just say it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Make men wish that religion were true, and then show them that it is. And so it's like that desire. It's kind of like it's related to Lewis's idea of if you have desire for something that this world doesn't have, like that's evidence almost of being made for something else, or because a lot of belief, I think what he's getting at, the thing underneath that is a lot of belief is rooted ultimately in desire and what you want to be true. And I said in there, I said this also works for universalism, and then went on to talk about that, and I said like because this is something I quote from Lewis, which is actually from the Chronicles of Narnia. It's from the magician's nephew, but he says, what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing. It also depends upon the kind of person you are, which has been like one of my repeated phrases I've said forever in the corner. And I said, do you want it to be true, really true? Or do you just think that you should want it to be true, which are different things? And so I say all that to illustrate that was kind of the move for me from annihilationism to universalism. I'm like, this
Yeah.
is the best story.
No, that's
And
good.
that's what I want to be true. And so I'm just going to call myself a Christian universalist.
Okay.
Um, so I say all that to say, like, to answer your question, circling back, I've deconstructed a lot of my beliefs and my thinking, my propositions around things have changed as I've evolved in my faith. And I would argue they probably should if you're learning and growing and listening. But I've never had like a personal existential crisis or like doubt about. I don't even like saying God's existence because that's a complicated conversation too of God's reality. Let's call it that way. Um, that that God is real and He loves me. That like Jesus is like without getting into the detail of all of that. Like I've never doubted God's love for me. However, that's understood. My ways of understanding that have changed and evolved. But I think because I've always been kind of, I don't know, a born mystic where like all that stuff can change and that's always been separate from like the deeper fundamental thing that like all this can change for me and that doesn't unsettle me at all. Like all the credo stuff, like credo religio that Vervaeke talks about, the religio is actually the thing that unites and binds. It's Christ. It's like the Christ versus Diabolos, the thing that divides. That thing is always deeper than the way I talk about it.
Yeah.
And so because I didn't have those two things married ever, that when these things change, that didn't unsettle my actual faith.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. I I'm quite an open person in terms of personality at least as well. And I do call myself a Christian, but I wonder, and maybe this is a question to you, can one call themselves a Christian if they are not sure that this is the only way? Um, and I'm saying that in context of other religions.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was speaking to Paul about this, and he described other religions and then prayers, for example, to Allah as not correctly addressed letters, for example. I don't understand a lot of other traditions well because I think it takes participation. I think it takes years to really do that. Um,
Completely agree. Yeah, maybe a life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I find it difficult to say this is the way and this is the only way. And I don't know how you deal with that or if you deal with that, if it's something that you think about at all.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. Like that's what the whole live stream was about this morning,
Yeah,
really, on proselytizing, and because it's related to that. If because if if Christianity is the only way in a because this is connected to my whole thing about just deconstruction. Because if Christianity is the only way in an ideological way, in that you need to believe that all the credo has to be the same, then it is an a totally exclusivist zero sum thing in a binary way. But again, because I'm a mystic, I don't think that that's true, or I think that God's going to work all that out in the
Mm,
end. I don't. I have convictions about all that stuff because I will say all those things. Like there's a danger in saying those things that came up on the live stream this morning, even calling yourself a Christian because of what other people hear when you say that,
yeah.
and all the baggage that comes along with that. I still do it because I know all that baggage that comes with it, and I just accept that that's going to be what it's going to be. And if somebody projects upon me all sorts of things that I'm not saying when I call myself a Christian, like that's on you. I can't really help that. It's kind of like, tell me about the God you don't believe in. I probably don't believe in him either. Tell me about what do you hear when I say I'm a Christian? Because that's probably
Yes.
not what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't. I guess what I would say is like I would affirm things like it's funny because I had a friend come over. Someone in the corner actually gave me an icon, which is cool because I reminded them of, and it's this saint who is really well known for saying there is no salvation outside the church. And he said that's funny because he knows that I'm a Christian universalist. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I don't even see those things in conflict because at the end of the day, I think the only thing that exists is Christ, is the church. Like we have a line in the Orthodox liturgy that says Christ, the only existent one. And I think the church is the bride of Christ, and so then is united to Christ, and so it only has life in its being united to Christ. And so all of existence is Christ, is the church. It's all the same thing. And like I will say that propositionally, but what does that mean and how is that applied as it relates to every particular person that exists and has existed, and how does that relate to their self-identity with their own propositions? I have no idea.
Mm,
I don't know that kind of stuff.
yeah.
And I don't think that's my job to figure any of that stuff out.
Yeah, I feel that. Are you curious about what you will experience after death or upon death?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're
But
open,
almost,
right? Open
huh?
to experience. You're open to experiences.
Yeah.
So,
Like this is something that actually weirds out my wife because I'm kind of and not, I don't say this in like a morose, weird kind of goth, like I'm a gothic emo boy kind of a way, but I'm kind of obsessed with death. Like I think it's really, I don't know. I think it's really cool, almost in a way. And this seems weird to say as a Christian, but it's almost like Jordan Peterson had this little quip. I need to go back and watch it and re-listen to it. But in his Russell Brand conversation, it was just one of these little passing remarks where he said, like, what is life? What is you? And he said, I've thought about that a little bit. And I think in like the fullness of the understanding of what life, it includes death. He just like made some little passing comment, and I think that's very true. I actually think it's what because we just got through the Easter season, Pascha and Orthodoxy and Lent and all that. And that's when the repeated phrase that we say over and over and over, besides Christ is risen and truly is risen, is we say, you know, trampling down death by death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life. And that's the icon of the resurrection, is Christ pulling Adam and Eve out of the grave. And so, like, there's something, death to me, I say all that to say, death to me is like the greatest adventure. Like I'm almost like excited about it, like a roller coaster or something.
mm,
Like I almost we'll see. Like maybe this is just talking a big game, but I kind of feel like I've told people this before and it's true. Like and I know because it's almost because like I cry when I talk about it. I almost feel like it's like that Lana Del Rey album, Born to Die. Like I feel that way. Like I feel like that's the thing I'm gonna be best at in life is dying.
mm.
Like I don't know that I'm great at a lot of things. I feel like I'm gonna do pretty well with that. I hope I'm gonna die well. I'm prayerful that I will. And And am I excited for like what's on the other side? That's why it's almost so fun to me. It's like I have no idea. Like I have no idea what's on the other side, you know?
Yeah.
But that just seems cool as hell, you know?
Yeah, no, I feel you. I know Ken Lowry described death as the feminine when I spoke to him. And I
Yeah,
think people that are very open will feel that way. They feel
it's the
very,
womb, man.
yeah, and they're interested in that. So it checks out.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pumped about it. And like there's all like you could there's an academic debate about it. And like I don't like I say that kind of stuff to my wife. She's like, "You're weird." I'm like, "Yeah." But it's not like I'm um it it's not like I'm seeking it out or like
Oh,
trying to kill myself or something, you
no.
know, or doing crazy things. Maybe more so when I was younger. I mean, that's part of my openness that I was talking about. Like
Yeah.
I could tell you stories of like a number of times when I probably should have died, you know, um, or could have easily died.
Hmm.
Um, but because you could talk about like, because this is all stuff that people don't know. I learned all this stuff in my studying of hell. Like what happens when you die, what most people are talking about there is it's called the intermediate state.
Okay.
So like between death and resurrection is this period where, and there's been lots written on it. Different traditions have had different opinions. Judaism has many different opinions with it. Like even around the New Testament time, Second Temple Judaism, there were like the Sadducees that didn't believe in the resurrection. Pharisees did. There's diversity within Judaism itself. Islam, which I know less about, I mean, has varied understandings of it. I'm sure Christianity has a lot of different understandings about it, but that period, Rupert Sheldrake actually talks about it really well. Um, the period between death and resurrection, and we don't even, and Christians too. I mean, we don't even know what resurrection means either, really, because even when people talk about I often bring this up, the New Testament in the Gospels, the the appearances of Jesus are weird. They're weird because every time he shows up, people don't recognize him. People that know him don't know who he is. What does that mean? I don't know. And people be like, the physical, do you believe the physical resurrection? Jordan is right for saying, I don't even know what that means. And I don't know what that means. Because
No.
did the disciples believe in the physical resurrection? No. He like showed up in the upper room. They didn't even know who it was. This guy just appears in the upper room. And then he starts explaining through all the scriptures, the Old Testament scriptures, because that's all there was, all the things concerning him. This random guy they don't recognize, which is weird. Like, who's this guy teaching us about the Bible? And then he breaks bread, and in those two things, it says their eyes were open and they saw him for who he was, and then he disappears. What the hell does any of that mean?
Yeah, it's kind of freaky.
I don't know what any
Yeah.
of that means. And so like what happens when you die? Like Jesus, when he, went into Hades, we say in the creed, descended into Hades. And there's a reference to it in Second Peter, I think, when Peter says, preached preach the gospel to what does he say? What's the word language? To those who had already passed away. It's one of those weird verses in the Bible that most people don't talk about because it's just like, what is he talking about? I think Richard Rowland speaks to it really well in some video, I can't remember, but like it was called Abraham's bosom. It's been called Hades. It's called Sheol. Like
Yeah.
Lazarus, the parable of Lazarus. That's all intermediate state stuff. And what's going on there? I have no idea. Rupert Sheldrake talks where what I tend to think it is. You didn't ask this question, but I tend to think I relate it to the dream. So like when you're dreaming, where do you go when you dream? I don't know. Like your physical body's here, and where your dream state is somehow connected to your physical body. But I imagine what happens when you die is it's like a ongoing dream
Yeah.
that has that can be hugely varied. Time though in dreams is weird. It's like a day is as 1,000 years, 1,000 years as a day. Dreams are kind of like that. It felt like it lasted 10 years and you woke up. You know, I feel like the intermediate state is something like that. And Rupert Sheldrake would say, because again, what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. Who you are in life and how you've shaped yourself in life will affect, I think, varied outcomes in the intermediate state. So like you might be in a living hell in the intermediate state
Yeah.
because that's all that's coming out of you. You just live
Mhm.
in a place of perpetual fear and anxiety and resentment and bitterness. Well, it's probably not going to be a good dream.
Do you think that the way you experience dreams are also related to how you will experience death? Because for me personally, in times where I was unhappy in my life, my dreams were pretty good generally.
Hmm.
And now my life is better and better, and my dreams are sometimes horrifying, like very often, like the worst of the worst. I don't know how your dreams are.
I don't know. My dreams are weird. I don't. I've I've talked about forever keeping a dream journal, which I think is a good idea. Because I really believe, like my wife and I will talk about this. Like I believe dreams are meaningful. Like I don't think they're just arbitrary stuff.
Yeah,
So I should probably act like that. Like I think they're meaningful and write them down and try to remember them and engage on them. But I don't know. That's fascinating that you say that because I don't. I guess my broad understanding of dreams, from what I know of Jung, and if I had to just postulate a guess on it, is that a lot of what's going on in your dreams is you're dealing with your um, both unconscious and subconscious. So things that in your waking state you are uh, not dealing with properly. I think a lot of that stuff gets worked out in dreams.
yeah,
So I don't know. That's interesting that you say that because I mean, this isn't to imply that you're somehow not integrated or something. That like when you're having bad dreams, it's good, or
yeah,
like when everything's going well, you're having bad dreams,
yeah.
and then the opposite. Like I don't know. I don't know what that means.
Okay. I think that you're right. The unconscious, subconscious things are definitely true. Like I've definitely seen a lot of themes that are just not in my conscious awareness ever suddenly come up. For example, I had when I was around 18, I was telling you that I was changing a lot at this time. I pretty much broke from a lot of the friends I had. And for the next 2 years, they kept coming into my dreams
Huh.
and being like angry with me and disappointed and just super confrontational stuff. While in my conscious life, I didn't even think about them, you know? So that's definitely, it
Hmm.
definitely like it was very clear to me, like a lot of the meanings of that. But then to tie it into death, I think dreams and death are indeed very similar. I like that you use the intermediary uh, word because the thinker that I like says that in Platonism, there's a similar framework where you have in dreams you're in an intermediate space, and in the intermediate space there is no space, but there is time.
Hmm.
In daily life, there is space and time. And then there's another realm that he speaks about, and that's the aveternal. That's what he calls that. And that's where there's no time nor space. And I think that is perhaps what a lot of people are trying to talk about when they say they've experienced something divine, something like mystical experiences. I think a lot of people are trying to speak about that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. Have you ever had something like that where you felt that both time and space did not really exist?
No. No, I don't think so. I was just talking to somebody about this just the last few days about mystical experiences and well, without time and space.
I don't think maybe we never really get there, but I've described before how I felt that perhaps at least the veil was lifted to show something like that, like a taste of it, but not a full immersion, because I don't think we would be able to handle that.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, oh man. So I have a number of thoughts about that. Before I answer that though, who's the thinker that you were talking about? Who talks about
It's
and what?
Wolfgang Smith. He's
Oh,
a
Wolfgang. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
you're aware of him?
Yeah. I mean, through I haven't gone deeply into him, but because of Karen's interaction with him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. You should. if we remember after this, send me that stuff you're talking about because that's interesting to me. So my personal experience, the closest I've had to a mystical experience probably is one of these times when I probably should have died when I was younger or could have. Um, I was tubing down a river. Do you guys do that? You know, like with like old tire tubes or whatever.
No, even
Like,
well, we do. Yeah, we do it like with inflatable tires, but
yeah,
not
yeah,
actual.
inflatable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we were doing it down this river in South Dakota, and it's not like a big, great river. There's not a lot of water in South Dakota, and um, and there were these spots, and I was doing it with a bunch of friends. I'm trying to think of when it was, like if it was high school, it's probably high school, or if it was later on in college, I can't remember exactly. But we had all these different tires, and some of them were smaller, and then we had this one big one. It was like a tractor tire, and nobody really liked that because like it's just not, it's awkward to sit on. Like you can't sit in it well. Where like the smaller ones, they're perfect. Just your butt
Yeah.
goes in it, chill. Um, and I don't know, we were drinking and partying like we always were. Like that's what we always did in Western South Dakota was just got drunk all the time. And and this river was had all these shallow spots. It would be, your tube would kind of catch on the gravel and whatever, and it wasn't ever very deep. So it was just we weren't ever thinking about it. And we were rotating the tubes, and the one time I got the tractor tube and we started rounding this bend in the corner, and the water started picking up a lot faster than it was the rest of the time. And so then all of a sudden, like I just put down my legs in the tube to get to the bottom and get out of the current or whatever. And like I couldn't reach the bottom. Like I went all the way down. And so like it all of a sudden got that deep where it was deeper than I could even touch. And this current was really picking up and it was moving toward this bend in the river. So like all the heavy current was headed for this bend in the river where all this trees and brush and sticks and stuff had accumulated, and I started heading for that. And like it just all happened so fast that before I just couldn't get out of the current. And this tube, the current was going so fast that this tube, there was a big log like this big around, probably just a couple feet off the water. And the tube like got sucked like about halfway under this thing while I was in the middle of it. And so like I grabbed the log just trying to hang on, but like the current was so strong that it just like sucked me under the water in this river. And I remember, and like the reason I bring this up is because I remember being under the water and the water's just turning around and I like am opening, and I just remember having this period like I was instantly kind of in that. It wasn't it wasn't a spaceless thing, but it was timeless, where it was just this thing of like all, it's kind of like life flashing before your eyes. Because I remember having the thought like this is the end, like this is where you're gonna die. Like you didn't expect to die this morning, and and then all like I remember like looking around and you just couldn't see anything. I have no idea. I mean, because a lot of times in those rivers, it'll carve out a bank underneath, and it'll carve out like an underground cave or something where like you can get trapped under there and like basically pinned to the back of some mud wall where sticks are flying around everywhere and just not get out. And I remember opening up my eyes and just not even being able to see light, and I was just like, I'm done. And then all of a sudden, I saw some sort of light and just swam as much as I could, and I popped out and was able to climb up on stuff. And and I just remember looking around at all my friends, and like they weren't even aware, or that, and they realized what happened to me. They were all just laughing their heads off. They just thought it was hilarious. And I was just thinking like I was just died. And then, I mean, whatever. This is how stupid we were as young kids. And then later on, after that, we found out that we were all like diving off the log into the current later on because we were just. And then you'd like coast off to the side and be able to climb up and just keep doing it. So it was like this cool thing afterwards, because you would dive in, like you straight dive as hard as you could, and like swim as hard as you could, and pop up like where you dove in. It was
Uh,
wild.
yeah.
Um, but I bring that up to be like that's probably the closest thing that I've had to some sort of mystical experience. Yeah, because I don't have that kind of stuff. A lot of people connected to the whole faith discussion, they kind of hang their faith almost on these mystical experiences too. And I'm just like, I don't, part of it is I'm just like, I'm weird, even with psychedelics. Like, I've never used psychedelics. I don't feel the need to use psychedelics because I'm kind of like, my temperament is such that, like, compared to most people, it's like I'm tripping all the time, you know? So, like, I don't think I really need drugs to,
No.
you know,
No, I think a lot of people
exacerbate.
don't, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
in ancient Greece, the mystery cults, they were only for a very small percentage of people that really seemed to be in need of them because like perhaps their minds were so hard that they couldn't do anything else but break them open with a radical experience. And I think it's similar today, which I think is why
Yeah.
it shouldn't be a popular general thing for people to do. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It sent a lot of people off the deep end. But that's been an argument. There was a guy, Bob Briggs was his name, who was like a psychedelic evangelist in the early Discord days. He
Yeah.
was just like telling everybody they needed to just be doing psychedelics, and maybe arguably, I don't know, people have said that for to break out of a kind of modernist materialist paradigm,
Yeah.
maybe that's needed. I don't know. It's beware unearned wisdom, that whole.
That's for sure. What are you specifically talented at, do you think?
I don't know, man.
What did
I
other
feel
people say about you? Maybe that's a better question that you're good at.
I don't yeah, I don't know. I think, well, I think my wife would say that I am pretty open, like genuinely open to changing my mind. And even when it comes to relational things and repentance, I'm pretty hardwired to, um, and part of it is a gift. Like, I don't even, it's hard. I mean, I suppose like anything, it's, people will always say to God the glory. And I guess it's true because everything is a gift, but at the same time, I'm very open to try this. Sounds so dumb and self-righteous, but to take the log out of my eye. Like, if I'm in a conflict with someone,
Yeah.
it's almost like this is how I'll temper it so that it doesn't sound so self-congratulatory, is that I feel relational strain so much, like I can't stand it. I can't live in it. Um, if like this is something I say to my wife because she's much more tolerant of staying in that tension or just not feeling it or like processing for days. And I describe it to her. I'm like, you don't understand though. For me, it's like I'd rather have you stab me. Like, I'd rather have physical pain than feeling this relational thing. And
Yeah.
so it feels desperate for me. It feels like I'm drowning. And so I'm pretty quick to reconcile or say where I was wrong about things. In like TLC space, people have said I'm really, I think I have somewhat of a gift for that kind of virtual hospitality thing to bring people out of the lurk because I am pretty open. I think largely people don't feel like they're going to be judged by me. It's a pretty safe space for people to come out and show their face or say whatever they want. And I really like people. Like, I just really do. I never, um, there's two things I often like to say. Graham Greene is one of my favorite authors, and he wrote this book called The Power and the Glory. And in it, he has this line where he says, hate lack of imagination. But I've also heard, related to that, I've also heard PBK say that, I think it was PBK, but he said, like, there are no boring people. Like, if you ever met a boring person, like, it's you.
Yeah.
The problem's you.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. I think I have a big desire to cultivate. I mean, you can call it discipleship, you can call it whatever, but like, I don't know, Barack Obama, community builder. I'm a big fan of building community. And I think somewhat this has kind of always been the case in my life. It's even been my case in TLC. It just kind of happens around me. Like, spaces that I'm in, like, people just, conversations just start happening, you know? And I think part of that is, I don't know, asking good questions, like that's something I've improved on because I can obviously talk, but being genuinely interested in other people, asking questions, which my wife has really helped me with, because I spent a lot of my life just assuming the answers to things rather than like I just felt like I could read people's minds, but you could just
Yeah.
also ask.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I do the same. Like I'll ask a question and I will answer it for them. Like, no, gotta stop myself. No, I have the same with
Yeah.
my partner. She's like, no, no, it's not that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it shows. Does it translate the hospitality to real life? Like you say, it's digital hospitality. Do you have the same
Mhm.
in your daily life?
Yeah, I think so. TLC's TLC's weird and it's easier because somehow I don't know what it is. It has a certain je ne sais quoi. I think a lot of it's the openness. There's a real allure to it because it's impossible. You are never gonna find, and I think I can say this pretty confidently. Maybe not never, but almost never. You're gonna find a group of people that are this high in openness. Like Noah, President Foxman was talking about this the other day, and me and Sam Tiedemann talk about this a lot. Sam's one of my best friends in the corner. That it's this weird combination of really high openness, but also simultaneously being low and agreeable. It's kind of contrarian.
Mm,
So we're very open to engaging, and like almost all ideas are accepted. But like we're also gonna go after a lot of them and be
yeah,
strongly opinionated about it. Um, so this corner is something that has it's the blessing and the danger of it is it can become almost addictive because you're not going to find it in real life. So to answer your question of does it translate to real life? Yeah, I mean I try to be like that with my kids, but like it's way harder. Like having a really feminine open space, that balance of femininity and masculinity is really hard with the relationships where you have a lot of time invested, a lot of real uh woundedness because there's such a different depth. Like Tim Keller in one of his books talked about this. The Meaning of Marriage actually was the book, which is a great book, but he used this term woundedness that really resonated with me. Like people you know a lot more, there's a lot of baggage, they've hurt you a lot more. It's a lot easier to be resentful, you know. Like if somebody's an asshole to you online, it's really easy to just like click off the stream or disregard it or not. You don't have to really engage with that person because the medium's different, but it's pretty hard to get away from your wife and kids. Um,
yeah,
I try to do it also. Yeah, I try to do it in church because I don't know that, um, or I'm starting to, but orthodoxy is just such a slow grind and trying to think about how to do that orthodoxy thing, but also being kind of the new guy on the block because that's not like Orthodox people are really nice, but there's still a lot of in America ethnic cultural components to it where they're very welcoming, like if somebody comes into their space, but it's also like not very, but they're also just kind of like doing their own thing.
yeah.
So like they'll welcome you into that, but they're not, but then after you're there, they're not necessarily seeking to, I don't know, continually engage with you or even learn from you. They're just like, thanks for coming into our thing.
And now you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of different. It's like there's this A.W. Tozer quote where it's like, something like, to have found God and still pursue him is the soul's paradox of love, scorned indeed by the too easily satisfied religionists, but justified in happy experience by the children of the burning heart. It's this quote that I memorized well. But it's that whole thing, to have found God and still pursue him, to have but it's the same with hospitality, to have found somebody and continually pursue them. That's the
Mm.
further up and further in. And I'm trying to learn that, negotiate it. Dude, but it's hard in real life. We have a local estuary. Uh, I've done different meetup groups and things because it is really difficult because we live in a culture that is uh, all of that hospitality was rooted, I think, in all these failed institutions that now people don't really use or have trust for anymore.
Yeah.
And so then we're almost kind of trying to rebuild. I don't know, spaces to be able to do that. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer your question. Trying to, but I think it's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you optimistic about the future?
Yeah, for sure. I think that you have like have you learned this podcasting tactic from like Lex Friedman or Chris Williamson or something? You have a very, like you asked, it's that. You have a vibe that's very Lex Friedman, where it's like you just asked a very short question and then you just
Mm,
sit back. It's cool. It's a good thing.
thank you.
Yeah, I am super optimistic about it. Like it's because of my volatility neuroticism thing, I can get into modes and negative feedback loops and patterns in the small frame, small picture where I'm
Hmm.
negative,
Yeah.
get depressed, anxious, whatever. But yeah, big picture, I'm like my wife always describes me and like my kids too, because we're all like super high energy, super high enthusiasm thing. We're just like a family of puppy dogs, where we just have like, and it's kind of a blessing, but it's like we have a very short. That's kind of the blessing I was telling you about of like reconciling with people. I have. It's not that I don't struggle with resentment, I do, but I have kind of this puppy dog attitude where I'm so, you know, like you can just like whack the puppy dog, and like 2 minutes later, there's like, we're just like best friends again,
Yeah.
because I'm so eager for the positive things, the good things, I'm so, I don't know, just uncurably optimistic. And I mean, that's part of my Christian universalism. Like, I don't dogmatically know the detail of how all that's going to play out,
Mm,
so I can't just like lay it out to somebody of how I think like this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen in like a certainty way. Cause I don't think anybody knows anything that way. But I do have this faith that, um, it's better than the best possible thing that I can imagine.
yeah.
But it's also tied, but it's kind of, but it's, I don't want to say that in like a flippant, cavalier, kind of hedonistic thing though, because it's like that line in C.S. Lewis of like Aslan, is he good? Well, yeah, he's good, but he's terrifying. He's not safe, but he's good. That's the line.
Yeah.
It's like a terrifying beauty.
Yeah. And beauty is like what you say, it's not safe at all. It's inviting and it's alluring and it's dramatic, but
Yeah, dude, it's like the divine eros. This is why I like talking about even in relation to God. I love talking about eros because it's the thing that's higher and beyond and even behind the sexual thing.
yeah.
It's a because that's a procreation, generativity. Like sex is just a is like the incarnation of that.
Yeah.
But there's a spiritual reality that's
Exactly.
deeper and bigger than that, and I think that's what it's like. The easiest way to understand it is like dating and pursuing a woman or falling in love. Like it's terrifying because like all the ways that it could go bad, or like hanging on every word, and like all of that is just like it's dreadful, but it's also like the best thing a human being can even understand. It's both of them at the same time, you know
Yeah. Yeah. I think, in life there is a lot of hardship and there's a lot of suffering and there's a lot of pain, but still we say God is good. And so that means that there must be a goodness beyond that suffering, or even inside of it, actually inside of it,
Yep.
yes.
Yeah,
And that
through
is a
everything.
major realization that I think can completely shift your paradigm. Because if you think God is being bad to you when bad things are happening, then I don't think you're understanding goodness correctly.
Yeah, that's the whole like theodicy or problem of evil. I'm just like, yeah, wrong question. Like you're
Yeah.
misunderstanding reality.
Yeah, it's a lot of that what we're doing. We're so deep in our paradigms and in our presuppositions about what good and bad is. We haven't even learned to question what that means.
Dude, that's it. Like this is we've had a lot of these conversations in the corner. I don't know if you've heard them, but that's all of that, trying to figure out what good and bad is. I talked about the Chinese farmer, but that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Mm,
That's the problem. That's the fall. The cross is the solution to that.
mm,
And you're trying to say, like, is it good or bad? No, Job. That's not, that's not what you're meant to do. I even think that's like, I don't know, a little bit of Jordan Peterson's hang up, or like even the question of why is rooted in trying to discern that thing a little bit. And I'm like, it's wrong question.
yeah. I saw a short of yours today about Joe Rogan,
Hmm.
and so that means that you're somewhat familiar with him at least.
I listen to a lot of them. Yeah, have throughout the years. Yeah.
Do you think that he's coming closer to Christianity these days? Because I'm seeing some of that pop up these days. People
I mean,
analyzing his behavior and the things he says and what he has said, you know?
yeah, kind of. I mean, what's funny is I almost think Rogan is, you know, I think Christians will say things like that. Then this isn't a judgment of you. It's like he getting closer to Christianity. I think a lot of whatever is happening in Christianity and this surprising rebirth of belief is from Rogan, actually. I mean, I think he's like even the Jordan Peterson phenomenon. Like, how many of us found Jordan Peterson through Rogan? And what he's saying, like when Rogan will say, I'm not married to my ideas, or like how to have a good conversation, or to be really engaged with someone and listen and ask good questions and steel man and push back. Rogan started all that stuff
Yeah.
in the modern world, and so it's just like what came into my mind right away. So Job or however you Dutch want to say it. Um, do you know Job personally? I mean, you know who he is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I listened a lot to him when I was 18, 19. Last 2 years a lot less, but if
Okay.
you spend this many hours with someone, then you know a lot about the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't, Job, I've always been really close with Job. He was like in my inner circle, early Discord days and Bridge of the Meaning days. We don't keep up as
Oh,
much
sorry, you
anymore.
said Job. No,
Job, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I thought you said Joe Rogan.
No,
No,
Joe Rogan.
but I know Job. Like I've met Job
Job.
a
Okay,
couple
yeah.
times. I don't know him super well.
So my answer to Joe Rogan is almost like, and this was a shitty thing to say, but I used to say this to Job all the time when he was, I don't know, like in that space of struggling and atheism and fighting with Christianity and figuring things out. And we had explicit conversations about this where like I would tell Job, I would just be like, you're fine. You're like already there. You're already a Christian. And he would just be like, don't say that shit to me, essentially. Like and it kind of is a condescending thing to say. Um, and I'm not trying to say that, but I think what I was trying to say to him is like um, the way my buddy Cal says it. I have this friend Kalia Rivet, who's a really interesting guy. He was raised Hare Krishna. He's an American dude. He's really cool, smart, like smart as a tack. But he likes this guy Christopher Langan, who's like the
Yeah, I
CTMU.
know him.
I don't know. And I don't. I think this is Hegel. We talk about Hegel a lot, but he says to know a limit as a limit is to already be beyond the limit. And I think that's right. And so it's almost like when you're wrestling with God or wrestling with Christianity or starting to ask some of these questions, like you're already there. You just haven't realized it yet.
Yeah,
Whatever that means. You're probably gonna, like all of us, gonna be spending out the rest of your life the significance of that and how it applies to your life and your identity, the label, and all those things. But like you're already there, I think, if you're asking those questions. Like Rogan, and it's like all the Tom Holland stuff. I mean, to be to grow up in America, you're Christian. I mean, this is the whole Christian atheism thing. All your values are Christian. It's like even when you were talking about earlier, when you're talking about Gladiator and earlier, like true paganism before Christianity, I don't think we have a really honest idea of what that is. Like, there's that movie, I think Vikings was some movie that came out recently,
is it a
which
show or
which it's a movie, but it
okay?
gives like a really accurate, I think, representation of what kind of Norse paganism would have looked like without Christian influence. And like it's dark as hell.
Yeah,
Like it's not.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not rosy. We tend to like romanticize a lot of that because we impute Christian values and Christian little bits of Christian story on top of that stuff, but it's not. Like, or I've heard this is all to come back to Rogan, but like I've heard Nate Heil, who's a good friend, used to say, like even valuing children. He's like, that's a Christian thing. Before Christianity, nobody valued children. They were chattel. They were used for labor and sex. Like they were nothing. They were livestock. You know, people didn't really care about kids or like even women for all the feminism that we have in the modern world. That's Christian largely. I mean, some of this stuff is present in Judaism, obviously, but you
Mhm.
know, the the whole world becoming Christian through essentially Western civilization and then technology, like the whole world has been thoroughly Christianized. That's Tom Holland's thing. And so, like even Rogan or Peterson talking about what does it mean to be a Christian and are they getting closer to Christianity? What's actually baked into and assumed in that framing is self-identity. Is propositional tyranny is the frame of the question. And I just would probably push back on that or not accept it and just be like, not that that doesn't matter. Like I call myself a Christian, although I know all that stuff. Jordan Peterson, I think, doesn't for good reasons. Who knows what Rogan will do? I think Rogan intuitively realizes the same thing Jordan Peterson does, and so he's probably not gonna. I would I would think even if he does start to think of himself as a Christian, I don't know that he'd go public with it.
So what do you think is keeping them from doing that exactly?
The fact the I what I would the language I would use to describe it is Peterson acknowledges it's a very Rene Girard idea that like my understanding is after Christ, after Jesus, the the kind of buffet of choices of you that you thought you had of deities and gods and different ethnocentric religions that you had went away, and there were two choices that really collapse into a higher choice because behind any distinction is a higher unity. It's just implicit, and it's Christ and Antichrist. I think all you have after Jesus is Christ and Antichrist. So the real thing that unites, that holds things together, true religion, and then the thing that mimics it for utilitarian purposes, which is Antichrist or Mammon. I always call it Mammon, essentially. And I think what Peterson has rightly intuited, which is why he never answers the question in Rogan, is that most of institutional Christianity has mammonized the label Christian. And I
Yeah,
think they know that deeply, and they're like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let you turn what I think is this high calling, which is like the roll, carry your cross uphill, pick up the biggest weight you can, and Jocko Willing, like all that stuff. They they believe all that stuff. I think Rogan even believes that stuff intuitively, but they're not gonna let that, I don't know, deep, deep calling be co-opted by ideological Christianity.
yeah,
And
that's a good point.
God bless them. Good for them.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot more
I just
considerations
don't
in
think
there. Go
I
ahead.
just don't think I can do that because I'm not gonna, I don't know. I'm just not gonna play that game. I'm almost playing a different game where it's just like I'm still gonna call myself a Christian even though I recognize all that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm doing the same. Not sure if it's wise. I'm gonna figure it out over the years, but it's worked out okay thus far.
I don't know, man. If Christianity is the thing that ultimately includes its opposite, which is kind of like what I mean by, and not to make this too like philosophical, but I love this guy Jordan Daniel Wood, but it's kind of he wrote this book, The Whole Mystery of Christ, which is a lot of it is stemming from Saint Maximus, which is which I don't know. Me and my friend Cal say is was Saint Maximus was kind of Hegel before Hegel. He was just like the Eastern Hegel, but he one of the big things in there is he talks about Christologic, which is the way to say it is the identity of identity and non-identity. So another way to say that would be Ian McGilchrist non-duality that includes duality.
Yes. Okay.
And I think that's what Christianity is. So like I think explicit Christianity even encompasses the implicit or denied Christianity. And because I think all there is Christ and Antichrist, and I would say Christ even plays an antichrist because he's harrowed hell.
Mm,
And so I'll just accept the label,
yeah.
even though it can be used transactionally.
Do you know of Jung's conception of Christ? Like Jung has this thing where when he tries to understand God, he does it also in this what you're doing similar, like this duality type of way, where he sees Christ and Lucifer as two sides of the same coin type of thing.
Yeah. I'm not as familiar with Jung stuff on that. I'm only peripherally familiar with Jung, but I like it right away. I mean, Lucifer's Luke, bringer of light. That's
Yeah,
what his name means.
something to ponder. Because then, so I really liked Jung. I read a lot of his stuff, and I remember Peterson always saying, like, I've never seen anyone criticize Jung that understands him.
Yeah.
And then Wolfgang came on the scene, Wolfgang Smith,
Yeah.
and he was like, "Be careful with Jung." And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna listen to this." And he's got a whole
Yeah.
chapter. He's got a chapter about him. He thinks that he deifies the unconscious. So he could, like he Wolfgang understands Jung to turn the unconscious into his God, let's say. And
Mm.
so I'm not sure what to do with that.
Well, so one of the Jung quotes that I know, so I would say I don't know, maybe this isn't true. You maybe know Jung more than me, but the unconscious I almost see as it's a lot of it's the transcendent and the immanent.
Mm,
So like there's a Jung quote that I love, which is until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate.
yes,
So even if he does idolize the unconscious, he knows it has to become conscious.
I see. That's interesting.
That's called incarnational knowing. That's what I call it.
It helps me. It helps me further along the path of understanding. In general, this conversation has. I want to be respectful of your time, but I really like talking to you. I loved your answers, and I
Okay.
love the way your mind works. Um,
Well, that's nice. That's encouraging because honestly, well, this is the last thing I'll say, and we can close it out, chat off screen a little bit. But I say this to my wife all the time because my wife is just, she obviously loves me, but she doesn't ever want to have conversations like this. And when I talk this way, which I often do, or like my daughter will say, she's like, Papa, you say many profound and boring things. Or like my wife will just look at me kind of, and tilt her head and squint and just be like, or like I see her eyes start to glaze over because I mention all that to say I thank you that this has been like that you've enjoyed the conversation. Like that's one of the addictions to me of the TLC is I'm like, there are people who actually like talking to me, who like the things that I say.
Yeah, well, that's that openness also, like I think a lot of us we're really willing to sit down and listen to a conversation for 4 hours, even if it only gives us
Yeah,
one insight. And like I'm happy to do it. I do that my whole days.
yeah,
That's why we consume podcasts and read a lot of books, you know.
yeah.
So
Because one thing can be huge. That's how my mind works. That's kind of my mosaic vision thing. So why I remember all these quotes, like that Jung quote,
yeah,
or the I don't know. I think of it like quotes and different things and threads, and then I see all these pieces and connections from them, and then that's kind of how I do live streams, and I'll like lay them all out, and then I'm just like, because I can't explain to you the mosaic. That's the idea. I can't
yeah,
propositionally. I can explain that for you, but I can point to this, and I'm like, do you see the unity?
yeah.
You see that thing? Like that's what I'm talking about.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, I'll finish the recording and then we could talk a bit. Guys, thank you for
Sweet.
listening. You can find Luke's channel below. I'll post all the links. I don't know if Twitter is something that you're gonna continue with, but I'll
We'll
post it as
see.
well
You
for
can.
now.
I'll look at notifications. We'll see.
Awesome. Thank you guys.